You know that strange feeling when your birthday arrives and everyone around you seems more excited than you are. While friends and family make plans, buy gifts and insist on celebrations, you feel an emptiness in your chest, as if it were just another ordinary day on the calendar. It's not that you're ungrateful or depressed, it's something deeper, more complex. You look in the mirror on your birthday morning and see nothing special, just another day to fulfill your obligations, work, live your routine. And this generates silent guilt because everyone expects you to be radiant, happy, celebrating another year of life. But the truth is, you simply don't feel that. The discomfort grows when people ask what you want for your birthday, what plans you have, how you're going to celebrate. You scramble for socially acceptable answers while internally feeling like you're speaking a foreign language. It's as if everyone else received an instruction manual on how to feel special about their own existence, but somehow you missed that day in human school. You watch others plan elaborate parties, post countdown stories on social media, get genuinely excited about cake and presents, and you wonder what fundamental piece of your emotional programming is missing. The worst part is the well-meaning pressure from loved ones who can't understand why you don't want to make a big deal out of your birthday. They interpret your indifference as low self-esteem, depression, or worse, rejection of their love and effort. So you end up going through the motions, smiling at the right moments, expressing gratitude you genuinely feel for their intentions, while internally feeling like an actor playing a role that doesn't fit. Jean Piaget, the revolutionary Swiss psychologist, discovered something fascinating about how we develop our perception of time, personal milestones, and self-worth that explains exactly why some people experience their birthdays in this peculiar way. His research with children revealed patterns of cognitive development that extend into adult life, creating specific personality types regarding personal celebration. Piaget's most surprising discovery wasn't about intelligence or learning. It was about how we construct our temporal identity and why this determines whether or not we can feel worthy of celebration. Through decades of meticulous observation, he uncovered that the way we process personal significance is established during critical developmental windows, creating lasting cognitive schemas that influence our entire relationship with recognition, achievement, and self-worth. Today, I'm going to show you how to identify if you belong to this specific group of people, how this was formed in your childhood through Piagetian stages, and most importantly, how you can transform this relationship with your personal achievements to finally allow yourself to celebrate who you've become. In 1952, in Geneva, Piaget was observing a 7-year-old girl named Marie during his studies on the development of temporal notion. It was the eve of her birthday, and when questioned about what having a birthday meant, Marie responded with something that deeply intrigued the researcher. She said that birthdays were when adults made noise and spent money, but for her, it was just the day she needed to stay quiet so as not to disturb the guests. Piaget realized that Marie had not developed the concept of celebratory self-reference, a cognitive ability that allows the child to place themselves at the center of a positive event. This observation led him to conduct a more extensive study involving 43 children across different socio-economic backgrounds in Geneva, Lausanne, and Bern. Through months of observation, he documented how different children reacted to the approach of their birthdays. Some showed natural anticipation, planned, fantasized about gifts and parties, drew pictures of their future celebrations, and spoke excitedly about being the center of attention. Others, like Marie, seemed disconnected from the event, as if it was something that would happen to someone else entirely. When asked to draw pictures of their upcoming birthdays, these children would often draw other people having fun, while they appeared on the periphery, watching rather than participating. What was most intriguing was that this second category of children showed no apparent self-esteem problems in other areas of life. They were normally confident in school activities, games, family relationships, and social interactions. They could win competitions, receive praise for academic work, and engage in leadership roles during playground activities. The specific difficulty was in their ability to place themselves as worthy of collective celebration that had no merit-based component. Piaget identified that these children had developed what he called a deflationary self-reference schema, a cognitive structure that systematically minimizes the importance of events centered on one's own person without tangible achievement attached. During the concrete operations stage, between 7 and 11 years old, when the child develops the ability to think logically about real events, some develop the logic that personal celebration is superfluous, narcissistic, or simply unnecessary. They observe the world around them, perceive bigger problems, family difficulties, social issues, and unconsciously conclude that celebrating one's own existence is frivolous in the face of so much complexity. This logical conclusion, perfectly valid within their developmental stage, crystallizes as a permanent mental schema that filters all future experiences of potential personal celebration. The process by which this schema develops is remarkably consistent across different children. Piaget observed that it typically begins with a moment of cognitive dissonance between the ages of 6 and 8, when the child becomes aware of suffering or injustice in their immediate environment. This could be witnessing a parent's financial stress while birthday expenses are discussed, observing a sibling who doesn't receive the same celebration due to behavioral issues, or simply becoming aware of children in their community who don't have birthday parties. During the concrete operations stage, children begin to apply logical thinking to real-world situations, but they lack the abstract reasoning to understand complex emotional and social dynamics. So they create simple, binary rules to make sense of their observations. If celebration equals resource consumption and resources are limited, then celebration equals taking away from those who need more. If attention equals fairness, and some children get less attention, then seeking attention equals unfairness. If joy equals frivolity, and the world contains serious problems, then expressing joy equals insensitivity. These logical frameworks, while developmentally appropriate for their cognitive stage, become rigid rules that persist long after the child develops more sophisticated reasoning capabilities. During his later studies, Piaget followed Marie into adolescence and observed how this pattern maintained and became more complex. At 15, Marie had become a brilliant, altruistic young woman, always concerned with social causes and the well-being of others. When her birthday approached, she felt genuine discomfort with attention directed at her. It wasn't social shyness, it was something deeper, a cognitive incompatibility between her mental structure and the concept of personal celebration. She would actively try to minimize birthday plans, suggest donating any gift money to charity instead, and often volunteer at local organizations on her birthday as a way to redirect the day's focus away from herself. Piaget theorized that during the formal operations stage, when we develop abstract thinking and the capacity for self-reflection, some people construct a value system where individual celebration conflicts with their perceptions of justice, humility, and life purpose. The researcher documented how these people, as adults, often became exceptionally empathetic individuals, concerned with collective issues, but with a peculiar relationship to personal milestones. They could celebrate others with genuine enthusiasm, planned memorable parties for friends and family, showed sincere joy in others' achievements, and went to extraordinary lengths to make others feel special and valued. However, when it came to their own birthdays, promotions, graduation, marriage, or any event that placed them at the center of attention, They experienced a sense of inadequacy, as if they were occupying a space that didn't belong to them. Piaget conducted extensive interviews with these individuals throughout their 20s and 30s, tracking how this pattern affected various aspects of their lives. He discovered that their difficulty with personal celebration extended beyond birthdays to include job promotions, academic achievements, relationship milestones, and even small daily accomplishments. They developed sophisticated strategies for deflecting attention and minimizing their own contributions to positive outcomes. When promoted at work, they would immediately redirect credit to their team. When complimented on their appearance, they would mention where they bought the item and how affordable it was. When acknowledged for their kindness, they would insist that anyone would have done the same. This constant deflection served multiple psychological functions. It allowed them to maintain their self-image as humble and considerate people. It prevented them from experiencing the discomfort of being in the spotlight, and it reinforced their cognitive schema that personal recognition was unnecessary and potentially harmful. However, Piaget observed that this pattern also created unintended consequences. These individuals often struggled with imposter syndrome, had difficulty negotiating for fair compensation, attracted relationships with people who took advantage of their self-minimizing tendencies, and experienced a chronic sense of emptiness despite their numerous accomplishments and positive impact on others. Look, I know this might be touching something very deep inside you right now. Maybe you're recognizing your own experience in the words I just shared, seeing patterns you've carried for years, but never fully understood. Have you ever felt strange, almost guilty, for not being able to get emotional about your own birthday while everyone expects you to be radiant? I know what it's like to carry that feeling that there's something wrong with you, that you should feel joy, but simply can't access that emotion when it comes to celebrating your own existence. Maybe you've spent years thinking you were broken, defective, or missing some essential piece of human nature that allows others to feel worthy of celebration. Perhaps you've watched friends get genuinely excited about their birthdays and wondered what it would feel like to want people to gather just because you exist, to feel deserving of cake and presents and attention simply for being alive another year. If this resonates with you, if you're sitting there right now, feeling seen and understood for the first time in a long time, leave a simple comment saying exactly this. I always thought there was something wrong with me for not being able to get emotional on my birthday. Your experience might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone in this journey of self-discovery. You have more healing power than you imagine, and sharing your truth can liberate other people who have been carrying the same silent guilt for years, wondering why they can't just be normal about their own special day. Piaget's research expanded significantly in the 1960s when he began collaborating with educators and child psychologists across Europe to better understand the prevalence and variations of what he termed celebratory self-reference deficit. His team identified 3 distinct types of people who developed this peculiar relationship with birthdays and personal celebrations, each with unique developmental pathways and adult manifestations. The first type, which he called empathetic deflationists, are individuals who during childhood developed extreme sensitivity to others' suffering. They usually grew up in environments where there were financial problems, family illnesses, parental conflicts, or visible social issues that made celebration feel inappropriate or selfish. These children, during the concrete operation stage, made the logical connection that celebrating when others suffer is morally questionable. They assimilated the information that resources, attention, and energy should be directed toward alleviating pain, not celebrating individual joy. This mental schema accommodates deeply in the cognitive structure and persists into adult life, creating individuals who feel genuine guilt when receiving positive attention, while aware that others are struggling. In Piaget's longitudinal study, empathetic deflationists often became social workers, teachers, healthcare providers, or volunteers, choosing careers that allowed them to channel their discomfort with personal celebration into meaningful service to others. However, they also struggled with burnout, boundary issues, and relationships where they consistently gave more than they received. The second type are perfectionist deflationists, people who during cognitive development established unrealistically high standards for themselves and concluded that celebration should be reserved for truly exceptional achievements. During the formal operations stage, when we begin to evaluate ourselves abstractly, these individuals develop the logic that celebration is only appropriate after extraordinary accomplishments that benefit society or represent significant personal growth. Since their standards are often unattainable, they never feel worthy of celebration. A birthday, for them, represents only the passage of time, without achievement significant enough to justify special attention. They might think, what have I actually accomplished this year that warrants celebration? I haven't cured cancer, written a novel, or fundamentally changed anyone's life. And this type often becomes high achievers in traditional sense, earning advanced degrees, professional recognition, and external success. But they experience each achievement as merely meeting basic expectations rather than something worth celebrating. Even when they do accomplish remarkable things, they immediately shift focus to the next challenge or find ways to minimize their contribution. Piaget observed that perfectionist deflationists often came from families with high expectations, where love and approval were subtly conditional on performance, creating children who learned that their inherent worth was insufficient to warrant celebration without extraordinary merit attached. The third type are existential deflationists, people who question the intrinsic meaning of temporal celebration and develop philosophical objections to marking the passage of time as inherently valuable. During the development of abstract thinking, they concluded that birthdays are arbitrary milestones that don't reflect real growth, social contribution, or significant personal development. For these individuals, celebrating simply for having survived another year seems logically inconsistent with their understanding of what deserves recognition. They might think, why should I celebrate aging when aging happens passively? What's meaningful about surviving when billions of people do it every day without effort? This type often becomes philosophers, writers, artists, or intellectuals who prefer to mark meaningful moments rather than calendar dates. They might celebrate completing a creative project, reaching a personal breakthrough, or making a significant contribution to their field, but resist celebrating what they see as arbitrary temporal markers. Existential deflationists often grew up in intellectual households where critical thinking was valued over emotion, where they learned to question social conventions and seek deeper meaning in cultural practices. While this critical thinking serves them well in many areas, it can also create isolation from communal joy and shared human experiences that don't meet their intellectual standards for significance. The danger of this cognitive structure lies not in the absence of celebration itself, but in the secondary psychological consequences that Piaget observed in his longitudinal studies, spanning over 3 decades. People who systematically deprive themselves of personal recognition develop what he called positive self-reference deficit, a condition where they become increasingly unable to accurately assess their own worth, contributions, and impact on others. They become experts at celebrating others, investing in relationships, building careers focused on serving, but progressively lose the ability to value themselves in a healthy way. This creates a psychological imbalance where they can clearly see the value in others but remain blind to their own significance. The deficit manifests in various ways. difficulty accepting compliments without immediate deflection, inability to ask for help when needed, tendency to undervalue their time and energy, attraction to one-sided relationships where they consistently give more than they receive, and chronic imposter syndrome despite objective evidence of their competence and impact. This pattern can lead to emotional exhaustion, unbalanced relationships, and a chronic sense of personal emptiness masked by external achievements. Piaget documented how these people frequently report feeling like observers of their own lives, as if they were always watching others live fully, while they only facilitate these experiences from the sidelines. They describe feeling like supporting characters in their own life story, essential to the plot but never the main focus of attention or celebration. The reintegration process that Piaget developed involves what he called recalibration of self-reference schemas, a systematic approach to restructuring deeply embedded beliefs about personal worth and celebration. This process typically takes years rather than months because it requires fundamental changes to cognitive structures that were formed during critical developmental periods. The first phase consists of recognizing that the ability to celebrate oneself is not narcissism, but a healthy psychological function necessary for emotional balance and sustainable relationships. This requires profound cognitive restructuring, where the person needs to question their initial logical conclusions about personal celebration and examine the difference between healthy self-appreciation and problematic narcissism. Piaget found that many people with celebratory self-reference deficit had created false dichotomies where any form of self-celebration was automatically categorized as selfish or arrogant. The therapeutic work involved helping them understand that there's a vast middle ground between self-neglect and narcissism, where healthy individuals regularly acknowledge their own worth without diminishing others. This phase often involves examining their childhood logical conclusions with adult perspective, recognizing that the binary thinking that served them as children was no longer necessary or helpful in their adult lives. The second phase involves gradual experimentation with small acts of self-celebration and recognition. Not necessarily birthday parties, but intentional moments of personal acknowledgement that feel authentic to their values and personality. This might include taking time to appreciate their own progress on personal goals, acknowledging their contributions to positive outcomes at work, allowing themselves to feel proud of acts of kindness they've performed, or simply pausing to recognize their growth and learning. Piaget emphasized that this phase must be individualized because what feels authentic varies greatly between the different types of deflationists. Empathetic deflationists might begin by celebrating their service to others as a way to bridge their discomfort with self-focus. Perfectionist deflationists might start by lowering their achievement thresholds and celebrating smaller milestones. Existential deflationists might create personal meaning-making rituals that honor their growth rather than arbitrary dates. The key is starting with forms of self-recognition that feel genuine rather than forced, gradually expanding comfort zones without violating core values. The third phase is the most challenging. Learning to receive celebration from others without minimizing, deflecting, or feeling guilty. This requires active reprogramming of the automatic discomfort response when becoming the center of positive attention. Piaget observed that this phase often involved processing grief about years of deflected love and appreciation, as people realized how much emotional nourishment they had rejected from others who genuinely wanted to celebrate them. Many participants in his studies reported feeling sadness about birthdays they had minimized, achievements they had deflected, and love they had redirected. This grief was actually a healthy part of the healing process, as it indicated they were beginning to understand the full cost of their self-denial pattern. The practice involved consciously choosing to receive rather than deflect, starting with low-stakes situations and gradually building tolerance for larger expressions of appreciation. This often meant learning new behavioral responses to compliments, practicing saying thank you without immediately redirecting credit, and allowing themselves to be honored without feeling obligated to minimize their contributions. Piaget followed some particularly revealing cases over decades, documenting the long-term impacts of both successful and unsuccessful attempts to recalibrate celebratory self-reference schemas. Marie, the girl he had observed in 1952, was one of his most extensively documented cases. At 25, Marie was working as a nurse in a children's hospital, had never had a proper birthday celebration since childhood, and was in a relationship with a man who had initially been attracted to her selfless nature, but was becoming frustrated with her inability to receive his expressions of love and appreciation. Marie came to Piaget's clinic reporting depression and relationship difficulties, though she hadn't connected these issues to her long-standing pattern of deflecting personal celebration. Through 2 years of therapeutic work based on Piagetian cognitive restructuring, Marie gradually began to understand how her childhood logical conclusions about celebration had created adult limitations. At 40, Marie had learned to create meaningful personal rituals that honored her existence without violating her values. Instead of traditional parties that still made her uncomfortable, she developed birthday traditions that felt authentic, spending the day in nature reflecting on her growth, writing letters to people who had influenced her positively, and performing small acts of self-care that acknowledged her worth. She discovered she could honor her existence in a way that aligned with her empathetic nature, without the need for external celebration that still generated discomfort. By 50, Marie had married a partner who understood and respected her unique relationship with celebration, had children whom she was teaching to celebrate themselves in healthy ways, and had found a balance between her natural empathy and necessary self-care. Another fascinating case was Henri, a man who developed deflationary self-reference after growing up during World War II in occupied France. As a child, Henri had witnessed extreme deprivation and suffering, leading him to conclude that any form of personal celebration was inappropriate, while others lacked basic necessities. This logical conclusion, reasonable for a child in wartime, had persisted into peacetime and professional success. At 30, Henri was a successful engineer who donated most of his salary to relief organizations, lived in modest conditions despite his income, and felt genuine distress when colleagues tried to celebrate his professional achievements. His marriage was struggling because his wife felt rejected by his consistent deflection of her attempts to honor him, and he was experiencing burnout from his inability to acknowledge his own needs and accomplishments. At 50, through therapeutic work based on Piagetian concepts, Henri managed to recognize that his aversion to personal celebration was rooted in survivor's guilt and childhood trauma rather than current reality. Gradually, he relearned to see personal celebration as honoring those who didn't have the same opportunities, transforming his birthdays into moments of gratitude and renewed commitment to his humanitarian work. Rather than rejecting celebration, he learned to frame it as recognizing the gifts he had received so he could share them more effectively with others. This reframe allowed him to accept appreciation from his wife and colleagues without feeling guilty, understanding that celebrating his contributions actually honored his commitment to service rather than detracting from it. A third case involved Dr. Anna Richter, a university professor who had developed existential deflationist patterns. Anna questioned the meaning of most social celebrations, finding them arbitrary and superficial. She had built a successful academic career studying philosophy and literature, but felt alienated from colleagues who celebrated traditional milestones like birthdays, anniversaries, and professional achievements. Anna's intellectual approach to life had created isolation from emotional connection and communal joy. Her relationships were intellectually stimulating, but emotionally distant, as partners felt they could never meet her high standards for meaningful interaction. Through Piaget's approach, Anna gradually learned to distinguish between genuinely superficial celebrations and meaningful expressions of human connection. She discovered that the act of celebration itself could be meaningful even when the occasion seemed arbitrary, because it represented people choosing to express love and appreciation. Anna learned to participate in celebrations not because she found intellectual merit in the specific occasion, but because she valued the human connections and emotional expression they facilitated. This shift allowed her to receive birthday celebrations from friends as expressions of their affection rather than meaningless social rituals, dramatically improving her relationships and overall life satisfaction. On the other hand, Piaget also documented cases where the rigidity of these cognitive schemas led to progressive isolation and depression. A woman named Claire never managed to overcome her aversion to any form of personal celebration, including professional promotions, her children's graduation when she was honored as a mother, and even her own wedding. Claire's case was particularly tragic because her deflection pattern had become so automatic and pervasive that she couldn't receive positive feedback in any context. Her inability to place herself in a position of positive reception eventually impacted all her relationships, as people around her felt rejected when she minimized their efforts to honor her. Her children learned not to express appreciation for her sacrifices because it made her uncomfortable. Her husband stopped trying to romance her because she deflected his gestures, and her colleagues stopped acknowledging her contributions because she made them feel foolish for trying. Claire died at 67, surrounded by people who loved her but had learned not to express it, having never experienced the joy of feeling truly celebrated and valued. Her case became a cautionary tale in Piaget's research, illustrating the devastating long-term consequences of completely rigid self-deflection patterns. Piaget's work revealed that the relationship with personal celebration is a powerful indicator of how we process our own importance in the world and our capacity for emotional intimacy. People who treat birthdays as normal days often possess heightened social awareness and exceptional empathetic capacity, but may be subconsciously punishing themselves for existing in a world they perceive as full of injustice and suffering. The great Piagetian insight is that we can restructure these mental schemas through understanding that celebrating our existence doesn't diminish our capacity to serve others, but actually strengthens us to contribute in a more sustainable and authentic way. When we deny ourselves recognition and celebration, we often become less effective helpers because we're operating from a deficit rather than abundance. During his last years of research in the 1970s, Piaget developed specific exercises and interventions for people who wanted to transform their relationship with personal milestones. One fundamental exercise involved creating a detailed inventory of all the ways their existence had positively impacted other people throughout the past year. Not grandiose achievements, but small moments of kindness, support, presence, and contribution that made a difference in someone's life. The goal was to develop a more realistic perception of their own worth, based on concrete evidence rather than abstract self-criticism or impossibly high standards. Participants would often be surprised by the length of their lists, realizing they had been unconsciously dismissing countless meaningful interactions and contributions. Another powerful exercise consisted of practicing receiving compliments and recognition without immediately minimizing or redirecting attention to others. This was more challenging than it sounds because the deflection response had become automatic and unconscious. Piaget had participants practice with simple phrases like "thank you" or "I appreciate you saying that," instead of their usual deflection patterns. They would start with low-stakes situations, like compliments on their clothing or appreciation for small favors, gradually working up to recognition of more significant contributions and achievements. The practice revealed how deeply uncomfortable these individuals were with positive attention, often experiencing physical symptoms like increased heart rate, sweating, or nausea when forced to simply receive appreciation without deflecting it. This physical discomfort indicated how thoroughly their nervous systems had been programmed to reject positive self-reference. A third intervention involved what Piaget called celebration without performance, where participants practiced honoring themselves for intrinsic worth rather than achievements. This was particularly challenging for perfectionist deflationists who had learned to tie their value to their output. The exercise involved setting aside time to appreciate their own existence, personality traits, growth journey, and inherent human dignity, without reference to accomplishments or contributions. Many participants initially found this exercise impossible or meaningless, unable to locate any sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to external validation or achievement. The practice involved starting with very basic appreciations, like acknowledging their efforts to be kind, their willingness to grow and learn, or their capacity to love others, gradually expanding to more fundamental appreciations of their unique personality, perspective, and inherent worth as conscious beings. The most profound transformation, Piaget observed, happened when these people managed to integrate their social sensitivity with healthy self-reference, creating what he called empathetic self-celebration. They maintained their empathy and collective awareness, but developed the ability to place themselves as valuable parts of the human equation rather than external observers or facilitators. Instead of seeing themselves as separate from the community they served, they recognized themselves as legitimate participants in the human experience, worthy of both giving and receiving celebration. This integration often involved reframing self-celebration as a form of service to others, recognizing that when they allowed themselves to be honored and celebrated, they were giving others the gift of expressing their gratitude and love. Marie, now at 60, shared with Piaget an insight he considered the perfect synthesis of this transformation. She said she finally understood that denying celebration for herself was actually a subtle form of arrogance, as if she was spiritually superior to the basic human need for recognition and appreciation. This revelation allowed her to lower her defenses and permit herself to be celebrated, not out of narcissism, but out of true humility, recognizing that she needed the same emotional nourishment as all other human beings. The integration process often involved grieving the years of deflected love and missed opportunities for connection. Many participants realized they had inadvertently trained the people who loved them to stop expressing appreciation, creating exactly the kind of emotional distance they feared, but for different reasons than they expected. Instead of being rejected for being too much, they had been avoided for consistently making others feel foolish or rejected when they tried to express care. This grief was necessary for healing because it motivated them to change patterns that were hurting both themselves and their relationships. The Piagetian transformation process doesn't aim to eliminate the social awareness or humility that characterizes these people, but rather to integrate them with healthy self-esteem that allows for balanced psychological functioning. The ability to celebrate one's own existence, even in simple and private ways, is fundamental for long-term emotional sustainability and healthy relationships. People who never develop this capacity frequently experience a chronic form of inner exhaustion, as they are constantly giving energy without ever allowing themselves to receive it back, creating an unsustainable psychological economy that eventually leads to burnout, resentment, or depression. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this journey of self-discovery about your relationship with personal celebration is much deeper than just deciding whether or not to have a birthday party. It's about recognizing and honoring your own humanity, allowing yourself to occupy space in the world in a healthy way, balancing your natural generosity with necessary self-care that sustains your ability to give to others. Piaget's discovery shows us that you don't need to fundamentally change who you are. Your empathy, your social awareness, your natural tendency to put others first. These are beautiful qualities that make you who you are and contribute to your positive impact on the world. But you can learn to include yourself in that circle of care and celebration, recognizing that self-neglect ultimately serves no one. This doesn't make you selfish. It makes you more complete, more sustainable, and ironically more capable of the service and care you value so highly. When you allow yourself to be celebrated, when you can receive the love and recognition that others want to offer you, you're actually giving them a gift too, allowing them to express their gratitude and affection for who you are and what you mean to them. You're modeling healthy self-worth for others, especially any children in your life who are watching how you treat yourself and learning what they deserve. And maybe it's time to consider that your existence in this world, with all your complexity, sensitivity, and capacity to love, is indeed something worthy of celebration, not because you need external validation to have worth, but because recognizing your own value is an act of courage and true humility that connects you more deeply with the human experience rather than separating you from it. The transformation isn't about becoming someone who throws elaborate parties or constantly seeks attention. It's about developing the capacity to receive love, to acknowledge your own growth and contributions, to feel worthy of the care and appreciation that others naturally want to give you. It's about healing the disconnect between your ability to see worth in others and your ability to see worth in yourself. If you want to continue discovering more about these deep patterns that shape how we experience our own lives and relationships, I invite you to join our community here on the channel. Every week, I share insights from psychology and human development that can help you better understand not only why you are the way you are, but how you can fully embrace who you're becoming without losing the essential qualities that make you special. Click the subscribe button down there because this journey of self-discovery and integration is just beginning, and it would be an honor to have you walking alongside me in this exploration of the human mind and heart. Together, we can learn to celebrate our own existence while maintaining our commitment to serving others, discovering that self-love and other love aren't competing forces, but complementary aspects of a fully realized human life. And if you want to understand more about how childhood experiences shape your current relationship patterns, don't miss our next video about the psychology of people who have difficulty receiving help, where we'll explore how early cognitive development influences our adult capacity to accept emotional support from others, and why some people find it easier to give than to receive in all areas of life.